Hello, everybody.
Good
Welcome to,
morning.
hi, Lois.
Good morning,
So,
Kriti.
good morning. So, let me introduce myself. I'm Kriti Das, and I'm a coach, healer, facilitator, and your host for this series, which is Creativity Unlimited. And today we have our guest, is Lois, Lois Wagner. She's from South Africa. She's a coach, facilitator, and she has a very interesting story. And the topic today is from victim to survivor to thriver and beyond. So, Lois, just take it over.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. You know, you talk about creativity unlimited, and we need creativity in our lives in whatever aspect, whatever we go through, wherever we have situations, we need to use creativity. So I love the fact that you've called this series Creativity Unlimited, because my story, whilst it's a story of healing, one needs to have some alternative ways, some creative ideas in order to get through. And so my story starts, and I'd love to share my screen for a few minutes just to explain how I got from being a victim through to finding freedom and how I used creativity to do that. So if I may share my screen, um, I'll just give me a second to get it up. Okay, so what happens in life? We go through life with normal functioning. We go through our everyday working, living, doing what we normally do. And all of us at some point in our lives will experience a disruption. Something happens that disrupts our lives. It could be anything. It could be you lose your job, you have an accident, you lose a loved one, you get divorced. Um, and in my case, two things really, well, a lot of things, but two main things happened in my life. The one was I was attacked, raped, and left for dead. And another one was I had a business in partnership and my partner betrayed me and we lost the business. And what happens is you become a victim. And a victim has all of those dreadful emotions and feelings, shock, denial, blame, self-hate, mostly anger. We may have shame or guilt, anger, fear, sadness, depression, all of those negative emotions that one experiences when they're going through some disruption, some grief, or some horror. They have all of those experiences. And then what happens is, after a while, you start reaching out, you start asking people for help. You start coping with your life. You bargain, you discuss, and you struggle. And when you're struggling, that is when you become a survivor. The word survivor, everyone says, oh, I'm a survivor of rape, or I'm a survivor of an accident. A survivor actually means to struggle. And it's really difficult in that phase, but at least you are starting to reach out and starting to look for ways to come away from all those negative emotions. But as you can see in the diagram, it's quite a convoluted journey. It's up and down and backwards and forwards. And one day you think, yeah, I'm better. And the next day you collapse back into victimhood. Something triggers you, you remember something. And then this is where the creativity really comes in. You start finding alternative ways to cope with the situation. You start getting optimistic and enthusiastic, and you accept, okay, this bad thing happened to me. And you bounce back to a normal life. You get back to where you were before the terrible thing happened, before the disruption, and you return to that normal functioning, to that meaningful life. So bouncing back is actually what we call resilience, and we can learn resilience. And then the next thing, we start looking forward, and I call this bouncing forward. So resilience is you bouncing back, and grit is when you bounce forward. You start focusing on a future. You have aspirations and dreams, and you start getting more optimistic and future focused. You get drive, you get your passion back, and you start working towards a more positive future. And that is when you thrive. You become successful, you get your self-esteem back, and you become empowered. But as you can see, the journey is not an easy journey. It's up and down and backwards and forwards right throughout the process. And then post-traumatic growth, that is when you start learning. Your whole experience gives you meaning. It's a challenge. You get you renewed strength, and that is what we call a growth mindset. You start learning from your experience, and when you start giving back, it becomes a benefit mindset, and that is fantastic. You start helping other people. You start sharing your story, and you start becoming a giver and carer of others. And then for me, the final and most important stage is when you forgive. You forgive yourself and you forgive others. And that is when you soar and fly to freedom, when you can finally find that forgiveness inside of you. So that is just a brief overlook of the journey. So if you want to discuss any of the, um, the points within that and how it worked in my life, I can take you through that.
Sure. So how difficult is it? Uh, it's like very easy to say when we go through a trauma. Um, so how do you have some tools how to like begin bouncing back?
There are many, many tools, but I think the first and most important lesson is, first of all, that your journey is your own journey, and it's different to everybody else's. So if you know somebody else who's going through a similar experience, it's not a matter of saying, um, oh dear, they're better than me, or I can't. It's fine. Wherever you are on the journey is the right place for you. And the second thing to know is that you are not alone. There are so many people, there are so many groups and organizations. If you just go into a place like Facebook, there are thousands of support groups. So you will find the right support for you. And then the third thing is that there are thousands, literally thousands of different modalities, treatments, therapies, that you can reach out to for support. And you've just got to find the right one for you. You know, some could be the traditional psychological way, could go for medication, but there's all this alternative energy healing, there's mind work. And so, you know, we could spend a day just discussing each different each different modality. So you've just got to experiment and find the right thing that works for you.
So are there any tools that you use to find the right one? How do you know which is the right one?
Okay, so as I say, you've just got to experiment. But what I always believe is the very first thing you've got to do is to accept. So what has happened to you has happened, and you can't pretend it didn't happen. You've got to say, okay, this was a bad thing. And you've just got to say, yeah, it happened, and feel that emotion. Go into that emotion for a while. So if you're angry, feel angry. If you just say, oh no, I'm not angry, or I don't hate him, or I'm not scared. It doesn't serve you to just ignore it, because later on in your life, it's going to come back. It will come back and haunt you and hurt you later on, because the mind takes it all in and you will get triggered later. So you need to experience that. And there's so many different ways of doing that, but the one way is to just feel it for that time. And it may be for a day, it may be for 10 minutes, but feel it. And get all the senses involved. Hear it, smell it, touch it. Get to feel that emotion, and rate it. So if you're really angry, so after I was raped, I was a 10 out of 10. It was a terrible thing that happened to me, and I hated, and I was angry, and so I felt that at a rate of 10. And then what you need to do is to find ways to replace that feeling. So instead of anger, maybe I must just reduce it a little bit to um, uh, disappointment, or what, just bring it down a little bit, and then start replacing it with other feelings that are more positive, and then slowly bring the scale down until it's a 2 or a 3, and then look for something and say, well, how do I want to feel? I want to feel happy and free and released. And you find those alternative, and the whole law of attraction and visualization and all of those different techniques. You create that and say, well, what do I want to feel? How do I want to feel? And you look forward to that. So that is one of the first steps to come out of the victimhood, is to first just accept it. Okay. And then for me, um, I didn't accept it at first. So I
It's
do
pretty
know what.
difficult. Like, so everyone has something or the other which goes in on your life, and we kind of love to, brood over the things. Sometimes, yeah. So
Yeah,
I particularly enjoyed my depression. So this thing happened to me, and I am depressed, and no one else understands. So, would you like to talk about more about that thing, that when there are many people in this time, especially COVID, lockdown, and people don't have jobs or work. So, and when you tell them that there's another option, um, you can get over it, you can create your life, go for creativity. So they don't get it. So when you're in that stuck thing, and you are so kind of not in a mood to get over it. So, what do you have to say to them?
well, that's what I say. You've got to just first of all accept it, but realize that you can't stay there for too long. So feel that pain, feel that depression, and then say, right, what do I want to replace that depression with? I want to be happy. What does happy look like? And then you start taking steps to get to that happy. When after I was raped, I was so angry. I was angry that this happened to me. So I wanted to change the world. So what I did was I became an activist, and I started lobbying and getting petitions drawn up and marches through the streets, and I really wanted to change the world. So by changing the focus away from where I was, you start facing forward. You start going, you're going to becoming a survivor. You're struggling through that and then using that grit, you start looking forward
So,
to something
basically,
else.
choose anything after that.
Sorry?
So, basically, you want to say that choose anything, choose something
It
different.
can be anything, and one of the powerful things you can do is to write.
Hmm.
To whatever you've experienced, write it down and share it. I went public with my trauma. You don't have to go public, but do share it with somebody. Share it with a close family member. Share it with a therapist. And if you feel you can't speak to a person, share it with your dog or your cat. just just get it out, because the more you can express it, the more you're releasing it to the universe, and you're sharing that pain with the universe. And writing can be so powerful, just for yourself. You don't have to share that with anybody either, but to get it out, express it, because as you're expressing it, you're starting to make sense of it. And so
So, it feels so much light to me when you said that share it with yourself so that the universe has it. It's amazing. That one made me, I had goosebumps with that.
Yeah. And I use the expression reframe, refocus, and redirect. So if you take a situation and reframe it as you would with if you take in a photograph, you say, well, that's the picture. I'm going to reframe it into that shape. And you refocus it, you make sure that it's clear, and then you redirect it into a new direction. So you take whatever you experience and put it into a different frame and change how you're looking at it. And it doesn't happen overnight. And that you've got to understand, depending on the depth of your disruption. You're out of work now, you've lost your job because of what's happening. You can't just say, well, okay, I'm going to reframe it. But if you start saying, okay, what did I learn from this? If I refocus my attention, what have I discovered about myself? How, using creativity now, how can I find something else that I can do with my life? What has this given me? Sometimes we get into jobs, we get into situations that it just happened and that's what we do. And then suddenly you get the opportunity to re-look at your life and say, well, maybe I shouldn't have been in that job in the first place. Look at the other skills I've got. So you need to do a lot of work on self-awareness. Look at your strengths, look at your opportunities, look at those things that challenge you and say, well, if those things are no good for me, let me find something that is good for me. And there's lots of techniques. You can't share them really just verbally like this. You need to sit down with worksheets and various techniques in order to discover. You can Google, there's a thing called Ikigai.
Yeah.
If you just Google Ikigai, do you know it?
The
Um,
Japanese
yeah.
technique.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's a very powerful tool. I'm 65, and I do that every few years. I go back and I relook at my life. Am I on the right path? And it's a simple, but it's a deep a technique to discover where your strengths lie and where you should be spending your time and your energies. And so when you're in this situation where you've lost your job or something bad has happened, go back to that kind of technique and say, well, now is the time. I've got no work. I'm stuck at home. Let me examine what I can do when this is over. Let me examine new ways of doing things by looking at what my strengths and my passions are. So those are that's just one of the techniques that you can use. You can do it on your own. It helps if you have somebody to guide you through it. Another thing you can do is to ask people what that ask people to describe you. It's it's very insightful. You get uh, 10 or 20 of your friends and relatives and acquaintances and colleagues to describe you. And there's some fun ways of doing that, creative ways. If I was a dog or if I was a car, what kind of a car or dog would I be? And you get an understanding how other people view you. And then it also gives you an insight into yourself. I'll say, everybody says to me, I'm a Land Rover. What does that mean? Or what should I do with that? If I'm a Land Rover, that means I'm tough and I'm adventurous. And so why am I sitting behind a desk? Shouldn't I be doing a job that is doing those kind of things? And it just
Yeah.
gives you a further insight. So it's a matter of self-exploration and self-awareness.
Yeah. So someone told me, like, because I'm into this field of self-help, facilitation, healing work. So someone told me, one of my mentors, she told me that just ask all your friends to tell you what you are good at. So, and that is how you get to know that how, what can you do more, what can you like create more, get creative with. So I really kind of connected that with what you said.
And then also, for me, forgiveness is it's the ultimate healing tool, and not everybody will get there, and you may never get there, and you may get there immediately, you may get there after a long time. So for me, forgiveness, I forgave my business partner 2 years after he betrayed me, but I did forgive him, and I thought, wow, that is so amazing. I actually hated him and I wished him ill.
Hmm.
And after I forgave him, I thought, wow, he means nothing to me. So what forgiveness is, it's breaking that bond. It's not saying what he did was right or okay, or he shouldn't get away with being punished or whatever it is, but it means it has nothing to do with me anymore. That's what forgiveness is. It's breaking that tie so that you can continue. And my story was I was in South Africa and I left to go to work in the Middle East, and I was away for 14 years. I was away for, well, it was 14 years after I was raped, and I was coming home for a holiday. And what possessed me to this day, I don't know. I got hold of the authorities. The rapist had been given a 25-year sentence,
Oh,
and I was coming home, and he had been in prison for 14 years, and I asked the authorities what was his status, and they said no, he was in prison, but he was due for parole on the day after I arrived in South Africa. And I thought that's too much of a coincidence. The law had just changed in South Africa, allowing victims, as they call us, to attend parole hearings. So I was the first person in South Africa to attend a parole hearing, and I went to the prison and I forgave the rapist. And people still say to me, "How can you do that?" When I left the prison that day, the authorities said to me they would tell me in 7 days if he got parole or not. And to me, it still surprises me to this day. I looked at them and I said, I don't want to know. It now has nothing to do with me. I have no need to hate or fear or have any feelings towards this person. And I said, I don't want to know. It just, I broke that tie completely, and it was completely free of that situation. And I literally flew out of that prison.
so isn't that liberating when you forgive someone? So basically, it has actually got nothing to do with the other person. It's basically for your own freedom that you forgive people.
Absolutely. And it's not difficult to forgive. The difficult part is to decide that you may forgive. And once you've taken that step, it may take you a while to start processing it. But the actual forgiveness is very easy. It actually is that easy. You just say, I forgive you.
So
um,
when Lois, when you're not forgiving, so is it like that you are stuck somewhere? You basically don't move out from that place of uh, unforgiving, like that trauma, basically. So you're still stuck there when you don't forgive.
You do, and because then triggers happen far too easily when you sit. So let's say my business partner, for example. So when I have a financial difficulty or whatever, my immediate reaction is, oh, if it wasn't for him, this wouldn't have happened. And so it brings up all of those old feelings, and by forgiving, it doesn't matter what happened. It's gone. And if I'm in a financial predicament now, it's not his fault. It's got nothing to do with him. It's mine. And so I've broken that bond, and so the triggers don't happen. It doesn't take me back to that time. So if I get triggered, I don't get triggered now if I hear other terrible stories about rape and people getting murdered and whatever. It doesn't trigger me anymore because I have let go of that. And yes, it's sad, and I feel for the people that are being hurt by it, but it doesn't bring back the terrible memories for me, because those have now really been put to bed. And that's what's so good about forgiveness. You can let it rest.
Yeah. So, so when you say that, oh, that the blame thing comes up when those triggers are hit you. So, so it you kind of blame someone else, and you don't take the ownership of your life. So, is that what happens?
And that's exactly what happens. You've got to take responsibility and ownership. And there's lots of theories about you've created that situation for yourself. Very hard to accept that
Yeah.
theory.
So
But
even I have that whatever we create in our life is we create it. No one else does. So
yeah,
if I talk about myself, if that terrible thing didn't happen to me, I wouldn't be sitting here. Yeah, I would be doing some 9 to 5 job, which I hated.
absolutely. So that shame and guilt and blame, those emotions are so useless. They don't help you. I didn't have the self blame. I was working late at night when I was attacked, and I never once said, "Oh, I shouldn't have been working. Why did I work late at night? Why didn't I ask somebody to come with me? Why?" I didn't have that self blame. But a while later, I had the self blame as, why didn't I know how to fight? If I'd known how to defend myself, I could have beaten this guy. I did fight him, but I didn't know how to fight. And I later learned some techniques that are so easy to use in my particular situation. And had I known those, I would have been okay. So I had that self blame and guilt for not knowing how to fight. But what a useless emotion. I didn't know how to fight. So why am I walking around with that horrible feeling that I'm useless and I don't know how to fight? So that's when the self-forgiveness comes in. You've got to say, well, I didn't know, and it's not my fault that I didn't know. So I can't blame myself for that. And so you need to work through that. And there's another very lovely, simple process. I don't know if you've heard of Ho'oponopono.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
And it's an Hawaiian prayer, and it just says, "I'm sorry, please forgive me, I thank you, and I love you." And I've used that expression so many times when people have upset me, or something is just, little things that have gone wrong. And you just quietly just repeat those statements and you let it go. You let it go, and it releases you from that situation. And that's, a friend could say something nasty, and instead of reacting and, and you start all getting, then you just quietly say, I'm, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and I thank you. Whichever order, you can say them in any order. It really works. It helps you, and don't all this energy stuff. It helps the other person as well.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really nice. Quite, I really resonate with everything that you said, especially the forgiveness thing. Um, so, yeah. So, Lois, you have something for our listeners in your freebie. So, would you like to talk something about it? It was an ebook, I suppose, that you,
Yes,
yeah.
it's a little guide that I wrote on how to get your mojo back. And mojo is just that sense of passion and excitement and happiness. And it's just a little guide on how you can get your mojo to keep smiling through the adversity, to keep smiling. Yeah, you've lost your job and things are tough, but there are things you can do to help you cope with that situation. And some of them are simple breathing exercises and just mindfulness, and it's almost a list of things you can do to overcome adversities and get your mojo back.
Okay, so one more thing, just kind of forgot it in between. Like in my country, India. So when you said that I didn't have that blame thing that I was working late at night. So when something of this rape happens in my country, like there are people telling you that, oh, she shouldn't have been working late night. She was too adventurous. She was wearing such clothes and all that. So when it's not about you blaming you, but other people are blaming you. How do you deal with
You know, it's difficult. But you've got to learn to say what other people think of you has nothing to do with you. And it's a difficult process to let that go, because we all have egos. We all want to be seen as good, lovely, wonderful people. And if somebody says something negative, we feel it deeply. But it's their perception. It's only their perception. It is not your. It's not your. It's not reality. It may be their reality, but it's not yours, and it has nothing to do with you. You've got to know that if something bad happened to you, it happened to you by somebody who was a bad person, and you cannot and should not ever say I should have, could have, would have, if only. Those if onlys are so useless. As I said, even with my that I didn't know how to fight. Um, if I met so many survivors who were in that struggle mode, saying, if only I hadn't had that drink, if only I hadn't got into that car. And it doesn't serve you to do that. You've got to say, I got into that car and that horrible person did that horrible thing to me. And you've got to ignore those people. Don't get into a fight with them. Don't argue with them. Just think, shame, that's their perception. They don't understand.
that? Yeah. So basically, what I call it is interesting point of view. They have this point of view. So it's got nothing to do with us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so that basically was a tool from Access Consciousness. That's a modality that I practice. So you could check, our viewers can check that as well. So thank you, Lois. I'm really grateful that you said yes to this interview and gave us some beautiful inputs, and I hope my viewers like it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Chrissy. I think it's a lovely program you've put together, and I wish you well.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.